I'd like to say very, very big welcome and thank you to Westfield Health who are joining us today. We have Richard Holmes, who is the Director of Wellbeing, who is going to take us through some of the pointers that we've discussed amongst ourselves as chamber members, and we're going to do a Q&A, and it gives you also the opportunity, if you have a question, to come on the commentary box, or if you have a comment. And Richard is happy to take questions throughout, or we can wait till the end and then we can ask Richard a few other questions of something that you want covered. So Richard, welcome, thank you. What would you say is the biggest challenge that people are facing now?
Well, I think everybody will recognise this from their own personal experiences, as well as their roles as business owners or HR specialists, sort of managing the people, and it's adapting to what it's become that very boring term, which is the new normal. And the key challenge in adapting to that new normal will be different for different people. So for some, it's perhaps loss of purpose, especially those on furlough. Others, it might be isolation. For key workers and home workers, it might actually be overwork. We used to do a lot of work before this situation in terms of coaching people working from home, and there used to be about 4 million home workers before this situation. There are now sort of close to, I think, 16 million is the latest target, and obviously there are a lot of adaptations people have to make in terms of working from home from the first time, especially if they've not chosen to do so, of course. So there's lots of differences depending upon the situations of individual groups of workers. But I think for everyone, it's just the not knowing.
Yeah.
And in that not knowing, trying to create new purposeful daily schedules or routines, because we've all been put sort of off sync, haven't we, in terms of the changes that we're having to accommodate.
So I would like to ask then, based on the challenges you've just described, Richard, how can the business leaders and HR professionals support their people? What would you suggest?
Well, humans being humans, it's our nature to want consistency and predictability in our lives, which is why we're all finding this situation challenging, because it's change and we don't like change. Now, I've done a lot of these forums and talking specifically to HR professionals. They're saying that above all, what they think that people are wanting is clear communication about what happens next and what they can expect moving forwards. But quite often the answer may be simply, we just don't know. What people do appreciate, though, is actually the honesty from their leaders in terms of saying, look, we don't know, this is the situation at the moment. And we also need to appreciate that as leaders that we might need to deal with different groups of workers in different ways in terms of the type of support they need from us. Again, that distinction, furloughed workers need a different type of support from people that are still working. Those at the workplace that are key workers need slightly different support from those that are working from home.
Okay, lovely. So if you had to narrow it down, what would be the top 3 tips?
Well, I think what's come out really, really clearly from all these sessions I've done is, number one, is communication. Just being as clear and unambiguous as you can with your people. Second thing would be leadership. And we do a lot of work on understanding from Wellbeing in terms of the leadership of the organisation sets the culture, it sets the environment, it provides the psychological permission for people to do things in different ways, and that's particularly important this time. But that needs to be done in a compassionate manner and an understanding manner. And then the third thing, I think, in terms of top tip, is looking at how do we support people. Now, that might be practical support in terms of advice on home working, how to survive furlough, those types of things. And actually, Westfield have got a number of free support packs that are available to all chamber members on those sort of key issues that you can use. The other thing to look at is wellbeing support. I guess people's health and well-being has never been more important than it is at the moment. So it's looking at how can we support our employees in terms of both their mental health and, just as importantly, their physical health, because we know our physical health integrates very much with our mental health.
So the businesses that you've been talking to, what are they actually doing? What does it look like?
Okay, a number of clients are doing some really fantastic things, actually. And it would be interesting if people listening in, if you've got innovative things that you've been doing to support employees in terms of their health and well-being, just share it in the comments section using the chat. Now, whether that's what employers are doing is bringing sort of live coaching webinars to help enable people deal with the immediate well-being or practical issues. I know our business, for example, was heavily focused on, we're a coaching business from a well-being perspective, heavily focused on actually coaches going to the workplace and delivering sessions. So you can imagine what happened to our business. It basically fell off the cliff. What we'd always done, though, was sort of live webinars like this in terms of coaching groups of people. So that's really taken to the forefront. There's also a whole host of free support services that are available out there. It's just a case of searching for them and finding them. But what we find that the companies that are doing it well is not just finding everything that's possibly available and then just throwing the kitchen sink at the employees, but actually picking and selecting those that are relevant to you and that have strategic value for what you're trying to achieve with your people. But I think one of the key things we could all do at the moment is, rather than focus on what we can bring in that's new, is actually look at what were we providing to employees beforehand. Are they fit for purpose in the new situation? Are they working for employees at the moment in the new situation? What do we need to do to change those services that we had before to make them more relevant? The other thing I've talked about, throwing the kitchen sink at everything. That's one of the things we found, that the organisations that are doing this well in terms of the communication support they're providing, it's the cadence that they're providing that at. So rather than throwing everything at employees at the beginning, it's feeding things out slowly in a controlled way so that you've got a sustainable support program. Those organisations that haven't done it quite well just throw everything on day one and then it's what to do next. So it's feeding it out in a relevant way.
That's a really good point. So we're all very concerned about mental health. We're seeing it in the news. We may not be seeing it in our workplace because of furloughed staff, but what can we simply do and quickly do to kind of address mental health in the workplace?
Yeah, this is a really, really common question that's coming up. And the simple answer is, actually, if I ask everybody out there, how many of you have already got in place a mental health plan for the next 3 months? And by that, I mean, what are you providing for staff to support them with their mental health now and planning to do for the next 3 months? How are you clearly communicating that support provision? And also, quite importantly, how are you strategically delivering those communications? Are they all in one place where employees know where to go to pick up the next bit of information, rather than there being scattered communications through different channels and employees missing things because they didn't know it was there? That's from a more sort of organizational point of view. What we're seeing with the organizations that are dealing with this really well, and it comes back to this leadership and culture piece, is they're looking at what are their team leaders doing. So if I ask the group out here, what have you got your team leaders doing in terms of how regularly are team leaders communicating with their teams and with individual members of the teams? How are team leaders discussing with team members how they're feeling? And how do your team leaders understand what works and what doesn't work for certain individuals? And have your team leaders got slightly different strategy for those workers that might be furloughed compared to those that are working home, compared to those key workers that are still in the workplace, if you have those? So I think just that simple idea of having a simple plan in place in terms of support, and then culturally what you're doing through your leadership structure, all the way down to supervisor level, to make sure that everybody's communicated to, feels valued, feels looked after.
Well, Richard, can we just tell you what we're doing at the Chamber, and whether
we're
we're a model of how we're doing it? So When COVID started, we put ourselves into groups. So basically operations, memberships and export. And then there was one leader that everybody reported into every day on the telephone. So I do my telephone calls either at the very beginning of the day or the end of the day. We also decided between 1 and 2, it was radio silence. That meant not answering an email, not answering a telephone call, not speaking to each other, but actually getting out in your garden or going for a walk.
I like that.
So we all agreed that, and we don't answer the phones or anything between 1 and 2 because we're not saving lives, so it can wait an hour, and we made that decision.
I'm
The
jotting
furlough
one down,
stuff.
by the way, for the next one.
Sorry?
I'm jotting that idea down.
Yep. So then what did we? Oh, the furlough staff. Now, I felt really bad for the furlough staff because it's a bit like leaving them on a desert island and we're sailing off with a broken ship and they can't help. And I do think they felt helpless. So we do include them on a weekly video call and we tell them what's happening in our lives and they tell us what's happening in their lives. But we also set up a WhatsApp group, one for fun. Maybe the CEO shouldn't be seeing everything on that. And then one for chamber business, just in case they wanted to tell us something or put something in place. And then
that's a good idea, actually, sorry to break in, is actually to keep those things separate. Because we know one of the key things that people that are working from home or furloughed miss more than anything about the workplace is actually the social connection as opposed to the work itself.
Yeah.
But like at work, we'd probably keep work things and fun things separate. It's a really good idea to do it through WhatsApp groups separately as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I don't think don't think I've posted really anything on the fun one. I'm not that funny, maybe. So like they know I'm not interested in the fun ones so much.
Can I ask you a question? Do you have people, whether they're on furlough or working from home, that actually would prefer not to get involved?
No, we made it an open invitation. You don't have to, but they all do get involved.
That's interesting because one of the things that we found talking with organisations is we can be almost as leaders, we can be overly keen to keep everybody involved. I think we've got to appreciate that some people are just quite happy on their own. Some people might not want to be involved in everything they do. And I think we've got to respect that as part of that whole process. Yeah.
And I would say I'm the one that's not involved in the fun. But the WhatsApp group has worked really, really well. Right. Also, we've got a couple of our staff who are on furlough. They're with young children. So their social life has gone completely out the window. So one or two of them, I will actually have a call with them in the evening because it's a long time in the evening, particularly if you're a single parent. So they quite welcome that fact that they're speaking, and it's not the CEO ringing, it's just to say, how are you doing? What are you watching on TV? How's your day been? And they all got sent flowers as well to say, the team are thinking of you and we thank you for being there to support us if we need to know something. And that's really gone down well.
Great. Really good.
So that's what we're doing. If anyone's got even something better to add to it, I'm sure that we'd love to know.
Yeah, what cropped up and a similar one I was just doing literally an hour ago was a concern that, and I think probably a lot of us have seen this in the dynamics in our workforce in terms of the furloughed workers and people that are still working. And it was the issue was, don't forget about the people that are still working, because all our focus is on sort of the care and concern about people that are furloughed. But we've got to be careful not to lose sight to keep thanking people that are actually working, because a number of those might feel a bit put out that they're still working where their colleagues are still on the same pay, but they're furloughed.
Yes, indeed. So in terms of going back to the well-being, Richard, are there any tips for managing sort of the personal feelings that you have on either side of that?
Yeah. I think one of the key things there that there's been a lot of talk about is just people's anxiety levels going up. And it might be, just for simplicity, to give you an understanding, is often the simplest way of viewing anxiety is that all it is a, depending on the severity of it, a worry, concern about what might happen in the future, which might be in the next 2 minutes, the next 2 hours, the next 2 days, the next 2 weeks. It also might be created by concern or worry about what's happened in the past, and how you feel about that and the consequences of it. When we look at people that are considered to be more resilient to pressure and anxiety, and we do that, believe it or not, one of the things that they really focus on is understanding and having an appreciation for what they can control and what they can't control. So they'll very much tend to take a view of being able to accept that there are certain things there that are outside of our control, but they don't seem to get as anxious about those things as the rest of us do. Now, a common misapprehension is that's because they have an attitude of, if I can't control it, why worry about it? And there is an element of that, but it's untrue, because what they're actually doing is, rather than focusing on the negative energy of worrying about something they can't control, they're actually diverting that energy more positively to look at, how can I can't control it, how can I influence that situation to give me a better outcome? Or in other words, other cases, how can I actually avoid that situation from happening? So they've got a different attitude to the way they approach it. And I think that's, especially in these times we're talking about before, is that the big issue for people is just the not knowing. It's taking a more positive approach to accepting that we don't know what's going to happen, but actually taking more positive steps in terms of looking at, how can I make things as best as I possibly can for myself, given that's the situation. That often takes a lot of load off people's minds. There's probably some specific things you do, Raj. One of the things I do is I now manage my social media and info intake, because all that does is create worry. A lot of my colleagues this morning got really, really uptight because the Sun ran a big news article that gyms won't be able to open until the autumn. Well, a large part of our business is managing on-site gyms in workplaces. But why read it? Because I know the actual facts are going to come out on Sunday or today from the government in terms of what would happen to gyms, as an example. So I'm just ignoring that story, and I'm going to just wait until the facts actually come out, and then we can deal with the facts. Okay. So, and then what we're finding a lot of people are doing really well, especially at home, is actually just taking the opportunity of either enjoying their furlough, enjoying working from home, taking the opportunity to relax a bit more, taking the opportunity to actually invest in our physical health a bit better. From my perspective, I'm actually really enjoying working from home. I'm avoiding an hour and a half commute each way each day. So 30 minutes of that I devote to an extra half hour in bed. And an hour of that I devote to going for a walk or a run, and then having a bit of a leisurely breakfast. It's brilliant.
Very good. I think I've forgotten how to drive, Richard. It's been so long. I must take the car out at the weekend, even if it's just round the block.
Yeah,
That's giving me anxiety, thinking, I haven't driven the car, because I'm not the best driver. But anyway.
Well, you should be relaxed about it then. That should be manna from heaven now, if you don't actually have to get in your car.
It is.
Yeah.
This morning when we had the NHS on, they were talking about the morale of their staff. And they actually asked our members who were on that call, could we send things like sweets, cake, packet of biscuits, because the staff really, really, it does very much improve the morale. How do you think the pandemic has actually affected morale in the workplace?
Well, again, it comes back to humans are humans. We're designed to be social animals, so any form of isolation or movement restrictions are going to undoubtedly affect all of us. But much like you've just mentioned, we're actually seeing a very positive side to this in terms of morale. It shouldn't be all doom and gloom. We're seeing in organisations, the NHS example is a really good example of this happening between organisations, if you like. But within organisations, we're very much seeing a big community spirit starting to evolve that wasn't there before. And you outlined how you as a group of employees are networking a lot more, purposefully and consciously. And we're seeing a lot of really inventive social initiatives that organisations are putting in place to try and create and maintain some form of social cohesion. And again, it might be really useful for anybody on the call. If you've got ideas that have worked really well for you as an organisation that have helped keep employees feeling they're together and improving morale, just put it in the chat and share it with everyone.
So going back to the employees that don't want to get involved, they come to work, so they have no choice but to see you. But in this situation, they might not want to be seen and get involved. Is there anything more that we should do, or just leave them to do their own thing?
No, I just don't push it. Make sure that they're aware that you're always available for them, but also make sure that that's not just words, that they actually do understand and believe that you are there for them, and let them come to you in their own time. That would be as simple as, for me. I mean, we have Westfield, we have every Thursday evening, there's a pub quiz. Yeah. The last thing I want to do on a Thursday night is actually be doing something socially with all the people that I've been in meetings with all day. You know, that's just the way I am. So I opt out of that. But they keep letting me know it's there if I want it, which is fine.
So on the call today, we're all individuals, and as you're, a healthcare and wellbeing, is there anything that would prevent us from getting the virus? You know, looking after ourselves as individuals.
Right. First of all, I'm not a clinician. As a wellbeing specialist, we're from an educational background rather than a clinical background. But I think the general consensus is, it doesn't matter how healthy and how fit you are, a virus is a virus. If it gets you, it gets you. However, the fitter and healthier we are, the stronger, generally speaking, is our immune system. And so the better able we are to fight that virus, and the less impact the virus is likely to have. And usually, I say usually, the quicker will be our recovery. Okay. So whilst it won't stop us picking up the virus, it will have a huge impact on our ability to deal with it if we do pick it up. So now is the time. We've got time on our hands, a lot of us as well. So now's the time to invest in ourselves and get ourselves, build our physical resilience up by being that little bit healthier and fitter.
Thank you. Now, it's very, very lonely at the top, Richard, when you're at the top of the chain and you're the leader, or you're in the leadership team, or you're in the HR team. Yeah. How and what sort of tips can you give us for supporting each other?
Yeah, there's one category you missed there, which is if you're a business owner.
Yes.
Which I used to be before Westfield, and that can be a really, really lonely place. And it's often a question that's asked, particularly amongst HR teams as well, is we're all very busy looking after everyone else. Who's going to look after us? And unfortunately, there isn't anyone else to look after us. So what I'm seeing in various organizations, the way they're addressing that is that they're consciously looking after themselves. So leadership teams, HR teams are setting up, if you like, peer support groups amongst themselves to be able to help each other through these times. Now, one of the things, if you're a lone business operator like I used to be, or whether you don't really want to be in a peer group support with your peers, one of the other things I've seen organizations do and individuals do is then reach out for people that they know that are in similar roles in different organizations and buddying up and supporting each other. And in fact, one of these sessions, we were talking about this in one of these sessions a couple of weeks ago, and people on chat started putting up their contact details, saying if any, I'm a this type of role. If anybody wants to reach out, feel free to do so. So again, if anybody out there wants to use this as a networking opportunity to get some sort of peer support, then if you just put up your details, if you're prepared to be a support for someone else, and likewise for them to be a support for you, just use the chat now.
That's a really interesting point, because for the last few weeks, we've had a lot of businesses contact us because they can't get the Sybil's loan or they can't get the grants, and it's been such anxiety for them. This week, I had one lady ring back and say, I've got it all, Bridge, I'm so happy. And the day before, I had a lady who was really tearing her hair out. So I introduced them to each other because they can actually support each other, not just about getting the financial aid, but they're two women, they're two mothers, and they're two business owners. So they had a lot in common, but they didn't know each other. So talking about young children, I don't have children, but I'm throwing this one in there. Any tips on how we can adapt how we work when we've got young children at home? Because we've got staff in that situation.
Yeah, and like you, I would class myself at the moment as fortunate that mine are all grown up and gone. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have to do as leaders is recognise that this is a real pressure issue for those people in our employment that have young kids that they're having to look after at the moment. So we've got to give them psychological permission to actually do things differently. Was interesting. This came up. Somebody came up on chat on one of these sessions again last month, and they gave their own personal example. And it's a good example of sort of leadership, listening to people and then adapting things accordingly. So we had a couple, had a 5 and 6 year old. They both worked for different employers, and they were finding it an awful strain to deal with that situation. So they came to an agreement that what if we worked 6 days, but we actually worked 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And they worked it through and thought, that might work for us. They both went to their employers. Both employers were open-minded enough to say, that's really sensible, do it. And it made just a total change. It was a way of them taking control of what appeared to be an uncontrollable situation, a bit like going back to the anxiety piece before. But what made it work was, again, from a leadership point of view, the making sure that the teams that those people worked in understood what was happening and actually respected that. So a little like your lunchtime break, the rest of the team understood when that couple were working and when they weren't working, and made sure they didn't put the pressure on them to communicate when they were off. So that's an example, and a really good example. But it's up to us as leaders to push those ideas out and then provide a structure that allows it to happen.
It's a very good point. And actually, when you're in this situation, or even when we were just at work, there's a temptation to keep going, answer every call, answer every email. Why is it really important, Richard, for us to take breaks while we're working at home?
Okay, right. This is one of my big things, actually, is I go back a step now. As humans, we're designed to work in what's called an oscillating rhythm. So if anybody remembers their old physics, which in my case was O-level, which sort of gives an indication of age, an oscillating rhythm, just put my finger, is where you have peaks and troughs going that way. So we're designed to work at peaks of high intensity, followed by rest and relaxation, and then go again. That's the way we're designed. We're not designed to work 100% flat out. That's just where we burn out. Okay, so what tends to happen when we work from home, and this is what we found when we were doing all the work with home workers before this situation began for many works, is we tend to actually overwork when we're working from home, because we don't have a fixed schedule in place for the day, and we don't have perhaps the levels of distraction, that we might have in the workplace. So it's really important that we actually recognize that this is a working day, build appropriate breaks into that day. And those breaks just give us that recovery time to rest up, re-energize, and go again. Now, those recovery breaks might not necessarily be going out into the garden, might not be putting your feet up on the desk. It might be doing what we call active breaks, which is where you're doing a less intense task before going back to a more intense task. So you're sort of, again, you're oscillating with your intensity levels. One of the things they say is the optimum concentration span of the human brain is 50 minutes, and then it starts to wane. So quite often, all you need is a couple of minutes, every 50 minutes, a couple of minutes break, just to allow your brain to switch off, to file everything that's been going on for the last 50 minutes, refocus, and then go again. So that's the sort of rationale behind breaks. And what we shouldn't be doing if we're working at home, which most of us on this call will be doing, is feel guilty about how we take those breaks. So if you're fortunate enough to have a garden and it's a beautiful day like today, take 15 minutes in the garden in the sun. Why not? And just properly recover and refresh, and then come and go again. What we tend to find is that people that have regular breaks through the day are a lot more productive than people that try and work flat out throughout. So it's good for business as well as good for you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's because you do know that the work's still going to be there when you come back after your 15-minute break. So it's not like you're going to miss anything.
No.
So sleep is quite, especially in this time, a lot of people with anxiety, worried about getting the money into their business, what the future's going to be. Any tips on sleep and why it's so important?
Yeah, well, it links to the recovery piece. So as well as having recovery breaks, for want of a better phrase, running through the day, obviously we have this big recovery break during nighttime, which is called sleep. And that's designed for the body to reconfigure itself, regenerate, refresh itself so that you can go again. So if the quality of our sleep, as opposed to how much sleep we get, which is a really important point, if the quality of sleep is diminished, we don't recover as well and we're less productive the next day. And poor sleep is just a manifestation of other things that are happening in our life. So we'll sleep poorly if, for example, as you point out, we've got anxiety. We'll sleep less well if we've had too many glasses of wine that night. Mm. So there are a number of things we can do. The most important thing from my perspective is we have what's called a regular sleep pattern. So I mentioned before, humans like consistency and predictability. The body likes that. And if it knows it's getting the same amount of sleep every day at the same times, it actually thinks its battery's being topped up properly. And so going to bed and getting up at roughly the same time each day, and that means within 30-minute difference, is a really, really important sleep routine to develop. The next thing is about your sleep environment, so your bedroom. So we know the optimum conditions for good quality sleep is that the temperature should actually be quite cool. It should be dark and it should be noise free. But we also have to recognize in that we're all different. So some of us can only sleep well if we've got the light on, is a good example. Okay. So pay particular attention to your bedroom environment. The other thing is to avoid anything that will sort of stimulate you before you switch the lights off. So don't be watching your favorite, most exciting TV program just before you switch the lights out. Try and avoid anything on screens if it hasn't got protection in terms of the blue light that's emanated from phones, laptops, iPads, that type of thing, because that blue light actually disrupts the production of melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, which makes you sleepy and sends you to sleep. So it stops it from being released. And be careful with your caffeine and alcohol intake at night. For me, too much alcohol is wonderful for getting me off to sleep, but it actually does disrupt your sleep during the night causes you frequent awakenings. Sometimes you don't realize you're waking up. And of course, it causes frequent getting up to go to the loo. So all those sort of things disrupt your sleep.
So going on, so we've done the sleep. Are there any tips while we've got this downtime to actually make ourselves a bit healthier?
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing is, I don't know whether people out there have heard about this, but it's something called TAT, T-A-T-T. And it's now a new medical acronym, and it stands for tired all the time. And now everybody's nodding and they're recognizing it because we're all tired all the time. And that's all about our physical resilience, which is about our energy levels. And we know that our energy levels dictate not only what we can do, but how well we do them. They also dictate how we feel about ourselves. So the higher our energy levels, the better we feel about ourselves, about life in general. And actually, that's a huge support for our mental well-being. Okay, so our energy is made up from basically four things. One, it's about the fuel you put into your body, because certain fuel is better than other fuel in terms of creating the right energy levels. And within that, I'd also include being properly hydrated. So the benefit of hydration to energy is that the cells in your body receive, if you like, the energy sacs from your food. But if those cells aren't fully hydrated, they can't efficiently metabolize that energy. They can't convert it. So you can be having all the right fuel, but if you're dehydrated, you can't use it properly. Exercise is really, really important. We know the fitter you are, the more efficient is that machine of yours called your body. So you can do more with less, in effect. So it drastically improves your energy levels. So if you do have the opportunity to get outside and do some exercise, do so. And doing so in the daylight will also help pick up your energy levels. The third area is sleeping well. So it's the fuel you put in, it's exercise, which is like servicing your machine, and then it's the sleep, which is like the topping up of the battery. And then the final piece of that energy equation is going back to the routines we were talking about before. So it's how do you pace yourself through the day to manage your energy levels most effectively. And that's where those breaks come in again, so that you can pace yourself properly. The idea being is you should be looking at, when do I need to peak during the day? What are my big challenges that I need to be on top form for? So how do I prepare myself to meet those challenges, then rest and recover to hit the next one? So quite often there's three simple questions you can all ask yourself. And that would be, this morning, before you started work, what did you consciously do, and I say consciously do, to look at how you were going to prepare yourself to meet the challenges of the day ahead? Yeah, whether that's in terms of fuel, exercise, recovery. What have you consciously planned to do throughout today to maintain that performance? Okay, and what have you consciously thought about doing this evening to recover properly so you can go again tomorrow? So that's three really nice questions to ask yourself every day in terms of making sure you're as healthy and fit as possible.
Thank you, Richard. I love the fact that everybody's drinking water on this call, apart from myself that's got a big cup of tea.
Yeah, I had my coffee
Okay.
beforehand. I know when to drink water and when not to.
Okay, I think I'll have to get a water bottle beside me in future. So I have learnt something fantastic today. Thank you so much, Richard. Everything Richard has explained today is, we have got it available for you. I know some people have come on the chat and said, can we have the information? Of course you can. That's the whole point of being part of the chamber. Are there any questions for Richard? I'm going to open it up to the floor. Anybody would like to ask him something? We actually have got 20 minutes, so don't feel rushed if you've got something. I'm just going to check the chat to see. No, there's no questions in there. So if you want to unmute yourself, put your hand up and ask a question, please feel free. And don't be shy. Leslie.
Hello, thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. Somebody mentioned to me, well, two things. One about the use of all this video conferencing, and we're using different parts of our brain, and that's partly why we're all so tired at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But then somebody else talked about blue light glasses. Is that something that can help with looking at a screen so much? I don't know whether that's just an apocryphal story.
So standard screens, regardless of what instrument they're on, will emit a blue light. Okay. Now you can get filters that you just put over your screen that then cut that blue light out. A number of items now. Organizations have recognized this and are actually building screens that don't emit blue light in the first place. So that'll often be advertised on the packaging and that type of thing. In terms of the use of Zoom all the time, I must say, whilst I said at the beginning, I'm really enjoying working from home and I'm getting a lot of benefit from it. A lot of the work I'm doing is through Zoom calls like this. I get to the end of the day, I'm absolutely shattered. And I think it's the intensity with which we're working now. And because we're doing it in an environment that we're not used to, that's making it more tiring. So we're used to facing people face to face and having conversations. But what we're missing now is when we go from the old way of doing meetings face to face and we go from one meeting to another meeting, we get natural recovery breaks from it. Yeah. Where we're able to sort of filter that information, get rid of the stuff that was useless from the meeting, try and put into short-term memory the stuff that was valuable, and then actually have some time to sort of get our brain set up for the next meeting. What Zoom does is a little bit like email did with letters. It's just intensifying everything, and it's enabling us to actually move from one meeting to another a lot more quickly. So what I've tended to do now is I'm not accepting any meetings via Zoom back to back. I'm using the excuse that my Outlook calendar will only book slots out in 30-minute sections unless I do a manual override. So I'm making sure that I've got a sort of at least a 30-minute break between each Zoom session, just to give my eyes a break, my brain a break, and my mind a break. That's worked for me quite well in terms of just reducing the fatigue levels.
I think that's a really good tip, Richard, because it is, I keep saying to people, I'm sick of Zoom. And I've always used Zoom, but it's just overload Zoom. Yeah. Zoom fatigue.
And we've all got an individual responsibility to manage that, because if I can't manage it, who else is going to manage it for me? But as most of us on this call are probably leaders in some capacity or other, actually we can proactively support our employees by actively engaging with them and advising and encouraging them to book their meetings in a sensible way. And not, if you're a chief executive, just to email everybody and say, I want a meeting at this time, without actually giving some consideration to see whether people are free. Because you can bet your bottom dollar, if you're the chief exec doing that, they will all be there regardless. And don't take advantage of that.
I tend to go to the team and say, check my diary, and then put the meeting in for me. I thought that was being lazy, but actually, no, I'm being very fair to the staff.
There you go.
It's just easier for them to find the time in my diary, and they can all work it out between them. Yeah. Okay.
That's helpful, Leslie, by the way. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Anybody else? Put your hand up if you've got a question. No, we've all gone quiet and shy. I think, Richard, you covered such a range of topics there. I think it was absolutely excellent. And we've got Anna Sherry also sharing some stuff on the chat as well. Alison, is there anything else that you'd like to add to the finale of today? Anything that you want to say?
Hi, Richard. Thank you. That was really interesting. I've been scribbling notes here. Just curiosity, is there any one
piece of advice that you think you've been asked more than anything else? You know, question that you've been asked about more than anything?
I think it comes down to, I think the thing that keeps cropping up is communication. Being very clear, unambiguous about how we communicate to people. Being honest with them about when we can't tell them what's going to happen in the future. And being firm in our leadership, but being compassionate with it too. I think it is really important. It's very easy, particularly when we're working remotely, just to dictate, because that's the easiest way of managing. But when we're all working remotely, the most effective way of managing is through advice and dialogue.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and we're all, as leaders, we're all, by nature of our role, we're all extremely busy. We're trying to sort everything out. And I think we've just got to be careful that we don't try and make life easy for ourselves by just dictating what we want people to do without proper thought about what impact that might be having on people. It's an easy trap to fall into.
I think that's a really good piece of advice, indeed. And I think sometimes if you're on the receiving end of that, don't feel bad to push back in a gentle way and actually just say, I can't cope with the demands. It doesn't mean you can't do your job. It might just tell the leader that they're actually being unreasonable. And
in most cases, the leader probably doesn't realise that. And they'll actually go, oh, crikey. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I hope that you found the session really informative. Please join us on other ones. I actually like the Q&A way of doing things, Richard. I think it just made it flow quite nicely, and we could add in anecdotal stuff as well. So thank you very much for coming along today. And we'll hope to see you soon. You're one of our benefit partners as part of our packages, so you're very, very valued and cherished by the Chambers.
Good.
So thank you very much indeed.
Okay. And if anybody needs any further support, then it's if you just contact Louise Kane at louise.okane@westfieldhealth.com, then Louise will tell you what free support services we've got available, as well as support services from a wellbeing point of view in terms of what you can do to help your people right now.